my personal economy is not going so well, and voting no. Some of the no's some of the people who voted were surprising to me. There were a number of Hispanics that voted, while Donald Trump is talking about deportation of an extreme number. I think there's going to be an awakening sooner rather than later when people find out, when Donald Trump talks about a good economy like he did the last time he was president, it's going to be for the rich and not for everyday Americans. The last time he was president, he had a $2 trillion tax break, the vast majority that went to the wealthiest Americans, and he's talking about tax cuts now. This is a Republican Party that has put in writing that they want Social Security and Medicare to be cut. And I have to tell you that I'm on the Budget Committee, and when that came up, I just looked at my colleagues and I said, make my day. You know, these are very popular programs, regardless of party. And so I think we're going to see opportunities for us to come back, certainly in the midterms, but even before that, I think that we'll be able to, let me just give you one other example. There's going to be some good things happening in communities because of what Joe Biden legislation that he has passed. And there's going to be a bunch of Republicans who are going to go to the opening of a new bridge, of a new something, and we have to be smart enough, because the Republicans, to a person, voted no on most of these bills, that we remind people across the country, your congressman voted against what is good that's happening in your communities. So we just have to be on our toes, we have to be smart, and we have a lot of people in the Congress who I think can articulate our agenda. I'm going to leave it at that. There's plenty more of it.
Well, it's really a delight to be with you this evening, to get a chance to be with my great friend Jan, who I have to tell you, I'm always relieved to wake up in the morning and know that you're representing me in Washington. But don't clap yet. I have to say, I am particularly relieved in times like these, with someone like Trump coming into office, to know that you're there fighting for us. So thank you.
Thank you. You know, he knows that I'm a badass and I'm going to keep fighting, so there.
I know it and I love it. And you know, Rabbi, you and I both are right now imagining that across the country, in synagogues and churches and community centers and basements of elk clubs, there are mathematician rabbis interviewing mathematician mayors on stages. It's the world that we can only envision. It's what's meant by Tikkun Olam, I think, actually. So I thought I would just add a few thoughts, beginning actually very much like Jan was, jumping off of the conversation that we had with Mia, Hannah, and Nora, 3 8-year-olds, who actually are not my youngest audience of the day. I spent some time with first graders at Caravali earlier today, and there is no better way in these dark moments to feel good about where we're going than to spend time with truly very young people who are focused like a laser beam on how to make the world better. I wear this other hat. I'm the committee person of the Democratic Party of Evanston, and in that role, spent an enormous amount of time and effort in the months leading up until the election, participating in and being inspired and motivated and frankly moved by what I found to be a historic mobilization. People coming out of the woodwork from Evanston, but from also across the north side of Chicago and the North Shore, feeling not only that this election was unbelievably important, but also that they really could be a part of making a difference. And it was inspiring to see, it was motivating to see. It was obviously, it added to the devastation of the election results. But I've been thinking a lot about that. First of all, because I feel a responsibility to remind people who were obviously deeply committed to the work they were doing and then deeply, bitterly disappointed that the fact that the outcome of the presidential election was not the outcome we wanted does not mean that the work was useless. In fact, the people we were working with went almost entirely to Wisconsin and Michigan, where Democrats narrowly won U.S. Senate races that were extraordinarily important, where Democratic candidates on the state legislative level made enormous gains in, for example, Wisconsin. So there are electoral differences in the right now that were made by that effort, but I think there's a bigger story, and I feel I felt emotionally during the course of this election, actually before Election Day as well, but particularly after Election Day, a lot like I felt in 2004. And that was an election where it felt like somebody who I thought we had seen demonstrate himself through 4 years in office to be unfit to be the president, was running for re-election. There was a huge mobilization across our area to stop that from happening. And then ultimately in a decisive but still relatively narrow election result, he won. And after he won, it felt like the weight of the world was on us and somehow we were not going to come out of this, and it was the reshaping of the American political landscape, and it was just a permanent, irrevocable shift to the right. And I felt that in my heart in those days in early and mid-November of 2004 and into 2005. And of course, we all know what happened next. It's exactly what Jan said, precisely. Overreach, ideological extremism, incompetence, a backlash, massive Democratic victories in 2006, and then the presidency of Barack Obama, which could not have happened if not for what felt like this kind of permanent cataclysm of 2004. And so I keep that in mind a lot these days, just to remind myself things can change, and they can change quickly, and they can change dramatically, and just as what we're seeing now may be a horrifying reaction to what came before, what might come next could be a really, really positive and transformational reaction. And so when we spoke to these 3 8-year-old girls who, yes, were devastated, our message to them was really not different than what I tell myself when I'm looking in the mirror in the morning, which is the devastation that I feel right now is natural, but as long as I convert it into work, the circumstances that I'm devastated about don't need to be permanent or even to hang around for that long. If, on the other hand, I allow that feeling to just stop me from participating, disengage, and pull back, then we've got a problem on our hands. So I'm sorry to preach at you, but that's very much on my mind these days as I try to calibrate my own activity and also to help others think through how to live in this world that we find ourselves in now. So now to answer the original question, Rabbi, we are lucky, as Jan said, to live in Illinois. I would respectfully suggest that we're lucky to live in Evanston. Both the city and the state have taken a series of steps to protect the rights and communities that are most likely to be under attack in a Trump presidency, immigrant communities, women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ people. We believe there may well be more to do. So for example, Illinois had a welcoming ordinance to protect the undocumented from federal action even before Trump became president the first time. In 2017, that ordinance was strengthened to make sure that it was optimized for the moment that we were in then. I've been in close contact with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and they believe that it will make sense for us to further strengthen that in light of what they imagine to be the Trump administration's next steps. We stand ready to do that, and I've learned I don't speak for City Council, but sometimes I can predict what they will, in their extraordinary independence, also want to do, and I feel pretty confident that our City Council will speak in one voice on this issue, and all issues that are about putting our arms together and around one another as the Trump administration comes for populations in Evanston. Another thing that I think is important for us to track, both on the local and on the state level, is what about funding for our priorities? And some of that is, we have a state law, in my opinion, an excellent state law, to mandate over the course of a 20-year period the replacement of all the lead service lines, the lead pipes that bring water to our homes in Evanston. That's a really critical public health priority. Lead is a neurotoxin. It is poison. And to make sure those pipes are replaced before they deteriorate is necessary. It's also monumentally expensive, and we've been counting on federal funding to enable us to do that. If the disposition of the Trump administration is, we don't care about that stuff, we're not going to fund that, we will have a choice. We'll either have to figure out how to fund it on our own internally, or else we'll have to say, well, too bad, we said we cared, but we don't care that much. That's going to be a hard choice, but there's only, in my opinion, one morally appropriate choice, which is to continue the work of replacing lead pipes. We just received a $10.6 million grant from the Environmental Protection Agency as a part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Thank you, Congresswoman Schakowsky. That is pivotal for our efforts to electrify buildings, move away from natural gas, which we need to do as part of our climate action. We are working furiously, and I am delighted to say that the United States EPA is working with us hand in glove to make sure that all the papers are signed and the agreements are finalized before January 20th. But again, this is an area where we ask ourselves, will the Trump administration come for those revenues? And if they do, two things. Number one, we got to be ready to fight them in court. And number two, even if we lose, we have to figure out how to fund these pivotal priorities. By the way, we're Evanston, and we're not going to stop being Evanston. There are people who say, Daniel, if you could just be a little calmer about Evanston's values, maybe you wouldn't be a target. Well, we're not going to stop doing reparations in Evanston. We're not going to stop doing climate action in Evanston. We're not going to walk away from the values that this community holds, that we as a city government have turned into policy because you have asked us to, the values that made me want to be mayor in the first place. But we know that that might make us a target. We know how Donald Trump operates. And so again, we just need to be ready to be smart and strategic, to be involved in legal defense. I actually was delighted several months ago, before the election, to hire a new member of our city staff, a new kind of senior policy and legal analyst. And the woman who we hired was on Attorney General Kwame Raoul's staff throughout the time that Attorney General Raoul was in office during the Trump presidency, specifically coordinating action between attorneys general in blue states, working with the Attorney General of California and the Attorney General of New York and other progressive attorneys general to have coordinated legal strategies when the Trump administration came for those states, either coming for residents of those states or revenues owed to those states. And so we have in-house expertise on this issue, and we're ready to work closely with the Attorney General and other allies across the country. We don't have any illusions this is going to be easy, and we also know that the goal of this administration will be to put us in bad spots and force tough choices. But my view on this is we have to be guided by our values. We can't allow assaults from Washington to divide us, to push us away from our commitment to supporting all of our residents. And I think if we hold those values close in our hearts, we'll be able to get through this in a way that provides the maximal protection to people in Evanston. We don't kid ourselves. We're just a municipal government. We are in the United States of America and subject to the laws of the United States of America. But we also have some autonomy when it comes to our policies and our cooperation, and we intend to use that to the full extent possible to protect everybody in this community.
Thank you. And you're allowed to preach. You're on the bema here, so this is where we... So I think that, one of the major questions, though, is that much concern that the Trump administration is going to put places like Evanston and the Chicago area and the blue states, back on our heels and always having to play defensive, and that they're not going to be in many places in which we can have gains, but we're just going to have to try to protect what we have. But I'm wondering if the two of you could talk about what are areas that we might be able to see some improvements, see wherein we might be able to continue an agenda that really looks out for the welfare of everybody in the community.
I mean, this is a much easier question for me than for Jan, because we're still an autonomous municipal government, and we had an exciting agenda of things that we were planning on working on, when we went to bed on November 4th. And we had an exciting agenda of things we were planning on working on when we woke up on November 6th. We were just gloomier about it all. And so, for instance, I have in my inbox today a first draft of a healthy buildings ordinance, which is a critical part of our effort to electrify Evanston's buildings. The largest single source of carbon emissions in Evanston comes from the 500 largest buildings in town. And under our climate plan, we need to get to zero emissions by 2050, and the Healthy Buildings Ordinance is going to essentially create a ramp on which the 500 largest buildings in the city will move away from fossil fuels at all, move away from natural gas for heat, move away from the various utilizations of fossil fuels in buildings. This is where this grant from the EPA is also helpful, because some of that work is expensive, and so we'll have some resources to support some of those institutions, particularly nonprofits and governments and affordable housing facilities, in doing demonstration projects to move down that path. So that's one example. We're working hard on affordable housing. We actually are just in the next few days going to finally close a transaction where what's been an underutilized surface parking lot owned by the city close to the South Boulevard Purple Line L stop is going to be turned into 60 units of housing, all affordable. So on our key priorities, whether it's economic security, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's climate, we're moving forward. And we're moving forward with some, we're looking over our shoulder, for sure. We're being strategic. We're not putting blinders on, but we are full steam ahead on the priorities that I and my colleagues on City Council were elected by the community to enact, and we're not going to stop.
Well, I was just thinking about, has anybody been following the nominations for the people that are going to serve us in the Congress, in this administration?
That's why we're worried.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. It seems the criteria for serving in the administration is that you really don't have any particular expertise in the area that you've been nominated. For one thing, I worry about the Health and Human Services, where we have Kennedy Jr., who doesn't believe in any vaccinations, and we have to make sure that our kids are still going to be able to get vaccinated, that the water will be safe for us to drink. It's really Christy Nome, who was the governor of, where was she governor? Anyway, she killed her dog and bragged about it. And, you know, I mean, some of these people are just, they come, you know, from TV news. You know, we have to worry about the management of the government right now by people who are absolutely inept, and see how that is going to affect us. But I think, again, I think normal people are going to say, are you kidding me? These are the people who are running these really important agencies of the government, and they don't have any prior experience or qualification for doing it. So this is a really, really challenging time. There is no question about it. When one of the first things that really hit me was that another 4 years of many Americans not having access to reproductive rights. There are still so many states, and Illinois has done more than its part. We have been the #1 server in Illinois of people who come across borders but you know, they would like to limit people's travel. They would like to be able to monitor the menstrual cycle of women who want to leave the state. I mean, this is how crazy this kind of thing can get. But it also, I think, crosses the line in so many ways. And we have to watch out for those things, and we have to call attention to it, and we have to stand up and object to the many things. I don't know if we're going to have the same kind of demonstrations that we've had in the past, but we're going to have reasons, certainly, to be, you know, Illinois has benefited from immigration. I was at a roundtable with the governor and the mayor and Dick Durbin and a whole bunch of employers who were begging to get work permits for people because they need the workers, and the workers need the jobs. So I think Illinois is going to play a big role when it comes to immigration. What's the benefit? But also, how can we have some sensible immigration reform, which we've talked about for many years. Throughout this country, there are young people, gay young people, who are afraid right now to come out. The kinds of prejudices that we are seeing allowed in so many states. The ability to be able to read and to get educated, real education in schools, is something we're going to have to struggle for, and we're going to have to fight for. We just have to be ready to stand up against this incredible, it's not just a move to the right, it's a move, I believe, toward fascistic kind of behavior. And we have to be there. Donald Trump has said that on the first day he wants to become a dictator. That's what he plans for. So this is important, and as Jews, this is really important for us to say those kinds of rights have to be protected. And we're just not going to put people, our people, or any people at risk right now. So as an organizer, and Daniel's an organizer too, what we're saying is that everybody has to be on alert and willing to push back and say, you know, these are really extreme moves that we are likely to see. And we can laugh about the ineptness. I have a whole list of those unbelievable assignments. It also seems to be a benefit if you've had some experience of sexual abuse. You become a candidate for some of these things. I mean, seriously, it's just terrible. But we can't just stand by and let it happen to us and to our relatives in other states and to our children who become vulnerable in so many places. So I'm just really today making a plea that everybody watches what is happening and then is willing collectively to say no. This is the United States of America. We have a Constitution, despite the fact that Donald Trump would like to get rid of it. These are major changes that they want to make, and we are in the business now of protecting our country. And again, thank God that so much good is happening here in our state. We're a model, but we have to all get to work.
So I just want to remind people, if you are online, if you have a question, you can type it into the chat. And I know that Becky is going around and collecting some cards with questions on them. And we've had some questions that came in ahead of time. So I'm going to go to you, Dan, to ask a few things about what's happening in the city. One is what you're going to do to help District 65 with its financial crisis. It seems to be the topic of every conversation that I've been part of here in Evanston for the last several months. And there's also questions about some of the new zoning laws that are going to allow larger apartment buildings in order to increase the tax revenue in Evanston, and what can be done to preserve the character of our city and to raise the money that we need to raise without taking away from that character. So those two questions I'll put to you.
And how long do I have? I'll start with District 65. I want to be transparent. The district and the city are totally independent entities, so I'm not speaking as somebody with an extra level, any more kind of direct influence over this than anybody else who lives in the community. But obviously, I'm a resident, and you know the ETHS and District 65 and the city are completely intertwined in our faiths. So District 65 is experiencing very, very severe challenges. It is obvious that they're experiencing very severe financial challenges. That's just a fact. It's in the newspapers. They're experiencing pretty significant enrollment decline. And I think it's fair to say that because of these various facts, there's a trust challenge as well. So there's a school board election on April 1st. Of the 7 seats on the District 65 board, none of the 4 incumbents who are up for re-election has chosen to run again. For those 4 open seats, there's a mere 17 candidates have signed up to run. This is Evanston. This is Evanston, right? In many communities, you would describe the challenges facing the school district, and people would run the other direction. But in Evanston, people raise their hand and say, I want to help, and I think that's why we love this town so much. I think those elections will be very pivotal, but by definition, a majority of the board will come in. And I think you know, as a voter, I plan to be asking all 17 candidates questions about their vision for financial sustainability, their vision for restoring the enrollment, their vision for restoring the trust. And I want to say something that I think is really important and gets lost sometimes. I worry a lot that there's a move to pit the objective of financial sustainability, which is, in my opinion, a non-negotiable, against the objective of racial equity, which is, in my opinion, a non-negotiable. And so I would be very disappointed if the solution that was arrived at in reaction to the financial problems was a step away from committing to a district that is truly there to educate all children and has a vision of racial equity at the center of what it does. And so the question that I'll be asking candidates is how do we incorporate these various must-have objectives in a plan for the school district? The city is a partner of the district. We're a partner when it comes to any kind of construction project. We're a partner when it comes to traffic safety. We're a partner on all of the kind of things adjacent to the school district that happen outside the schoolhouse walls. But I don't want to ever pretend that I don't want to usurp in word power that I don't have, and so I don't want to create an impression that it's somehow something that I can directly fix the city. At the same time, I think our partnership is important, and our goal is to make the job of the District 65 board as easy as possible, because they're not going to thrive if we don't thrive, and we're not going to thrive if they don't thrive, and that's I think the spirit in which we have to approach these projects of partnership.
Can I just say one thing about those who are really concerned about District 65, and the election is so important, and usually the turnout for school board is very low, and so people who are concerned about that, make it your business to find out who's running, what the issues are, and to participate in those elections.
Yeah. Right, I mean, there's 17 candidates. Sometimes one feels that there may not be 17 voters. So this is an unusual time. And yes, let me be really blunt here. When you have 17 names on a list and you've got to pick up to 4, that's a challenging problem. But exactly as Jan said, do not be daunted, dig in on that, and because engagement is going to be pivotal. On the other question, and I know brevity is not my strong suit, so I'm going to do my best here. The city is well into a project called Envision Evanston 2045. It's been going on for most of a year. We anticipate it culminating in city council votes in March. This is to do 2 things. The first is to rewrite our comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is like a vision document for the city, a sense of where should open space be, where should economic development occur, how should the infrastructure of the city be aligned with our objectives relative to things like mobility and pedestrian safety and cycling and sustainability and so forth. It's a long, complicated document that really sets the direction for growth and change and development in the city. Simultaneously, and really to implement what comes out of that process, we're rewriting the zoning code. And a zoning code is a less abstract thing. A zoning code is the set of rules that say, here's what can be done where. It says you can have up to 3 stories here and up to 10 stories there, and you can have up to 4 units here, and you can have commercial there and industrial there or mixed use there. It's the set of rules that governs what can be built and how land can be used. And this is really the meat of the issue. And so to take a step back, I would say the following. We spend a ton of time in Evanston asking ourselves, why is there not more affordable housing? Why is housing in Evanston so expensive? Why can't it be easier for families who want to stay here to afford to do so, for families who want to move here to afford to do so? And then we spend the other half of our time making it illegal to have affordable housing. And then we're confused about the outcome. We spend half of our time talking about how important sustainability is to us and how difficult and expensive it's going to be to meet our climate goals, and wringing our hands that we're not making progress faster. And then we spend half of our time making it illegal to do what we would need to do to make that progress. So let me explain what I mean. I'm a family of four, a wife and two children. We're not rich. We live in a modest townhome. I'm not complaining. We're very happy. We're very fortunate. We can afford it. We could not afford to live in 95% of our own neighborhood. And the reason for that is that it would be illegal to build our home in 95% of our neighborhood. Except for the narrow strip of road where we happen to live, all of our neighborhood is what's called zoned R1, which means the only thing you're allowed to build there is a single family home on a large lot. Well, guess what? I can't afford those. And so one of the zoning changes being contemplated would say, okay, now you're allowed to build a 2 or 3 or 4 unit structure on those large lots. Not a bigger unit, it would have the same height restrictions, the same size restrictions, but you would be allowed to have 2 units, like where I live, or even 3 or 4, so that it's no longer banned to develop housing that might be legal. We have rules that make it incredibly hard to have density and height near our train stations. Having density near train stations does 2 things for sustainability. Number one, it makes a carless lifestyle, or at least using a car less frequently lifestyle, more possible. And number 2, because it uses less energy to heat and cool multi-unit housing, you wind up with less carbon emissions. So part of what is proposed under the zoning plan is to make it easier to have more density in the downtown area and in other carefully selected zones that are really designed for more residential density, which, by the way, another question people ask me all the time is, what are we doing about empty storefronts downtown? Well, let me tell you what got us there. What got us there was that until March of 2020, there were thousands and thousands of people who had to be downtown between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday, or else they'd get fired. That's where their office was. They had to go there. Ever since the pandemic, they're working remotely, and the number of people going out to lunch downtown, because that's where their office is, the number of people going out for coffee downtown, the number of people stopping to run an errand on the way to the office from the train or to the train from the office has plummeted. It's hurt our local small businesses. More residents in the downtown would really help. So these are the ideas we're talking about, and I very much appreciate the direct framing, Rabbi, of, okay, but sure, Daniel, that sounds nice. How are we going to retain the character of the community? And what I want to say is that this will retain the character of the community. Evanston is full of diversity. Most of Evanston was built out before these zones were invented. And so everything that already was there was grandfathered. And so you can walk across the most affluent blocks of Evanston and see 6,000 square foot single family homes that go for well into the 7 figures next to duplexes, next to Six Flats, on the most beloved, desirable blocks in Evanston. The reason that's not allowed anymore has a very ugly history, because when explicit racial segregation in zoning became illegal, what communities that wanted to stay all white did was they went to restrictive covenants. You had to sign a piece of paper to buy a house in the neighborhood saying, I'll only sell to a white family. Then the Supreme Court said those were unenforceable, and so people had to do something else to keep their neighborhoods segregated, and what they settled for was economic segregation instead of racial segregation by saying, oh, you can only move here if you can afford a single family home on a large lot. What they were effectively saying is, if you want to live near me, you have to live like me. And most of Evanston isn't like that today. Most people come to Evanston because that's not what they're looking for. We talk about diversity and integration all the time in Evanston. And to me, these changes would not be a departure from the character and built environment that we love. They would be a doubling down on exactly those qualities.
So there are a lot of questions here about the future of the Democratic Party. People feeling rather despondent that in this last election the Democratic Party missed the mark. There have been some opinions out there that have said, that the Democratic Party has become the party of the elite, that it used to be the party of working people, that there were labor unions, obviously, they were the backbone of the Democratic Party, they don't exist anymore, and that's the problem, is that the Republican Party now looks like the party of the average person. At the same time, there's certainly things that the Republican Party has done to instill fear in voters, so that people feel like they're going to save the day. We had a young man who works in the Democratic Party politics, and he made the claim that the reason that there was all these anti-trans bills in states all over the country is because they realized that there were a lot of people that was attractive to, and that you could make trans people the boogie people out there, and that people would then get all galvanized around those things, and so there's was that kind of distraction, and that they became the scapegoats, and that fear tends to get people to be motivated. And on the other side, people saying, well, if the Democrats weren't so elitist, that wouldn't be the problem. But where do you think the Democratic Party has gone wrong in terms of showing? I mean, Congresswoman Schakowsky, you've been in Washington for 26 years now, and been fighting for people to have affordable housing, as you also, Mayor Biss, have been talking about fighting for people to be able to have livable wages, to make sure that that entitlement programs are saved for people who really need those things. And yet, it seems to be that people are voting against their economic interest and voting because there has been this fear that somehow that these people, these trans people, or whoever those people out there, are the ones that we need to be afraid of. What do we do to really address that? Or what do you think the issues really are? Because I think that really just saying that the Democratic Party is elitist doesn't really answer the question.
I do think in this election that we did not focus enough on just the benefits for working families that the Democratic Party can provide, that we need to go, including to rural area. We have to go everywhere, and we have to talk more about jobs, about unions, about opportunity. And I think a lot of people did not feel that we were addressing that sufficiently. But you are also right. As the grandmother of a transgender, wonderful young man who actually teaches first grade here in the Evanston Public Schools and doing a great job and living his best life with his girlfriend right now. They definitely played up these scary things as if it's somehow going to take over their communities, and it's so disgusting or whatever it is. But I do think that we have to make serious outreach, organizing, speaking to and with, and listening to what people are asking for in their own lives and in their own communities. And I think we could have done a better job of that. And as I say, it was a very, very close election. And this idea somehow that the Democrats now are elitists is, look at Donald Trump and the lifestyle that he lives. But so we have to reach out. We have to talk to people where they're at. We have to listen to what they want, and we have to deliver for everyday people. We have to do better.
Mayor Biss, I don't know if you have anything to comment on that issue.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add, certainly. I mean, I would underline that there's an inherent difficulty here. I've heard, I read the newspaper too, I've heard a lot of people say since the election of, hey, the Democrats need to not center trans people so much and talk about trans people all the time. And I think what's gone on in the US House since the election is a pretty good illustration. Sarah McBride from Delaware is a trans person who was elected to Congress. She didn't talk about trans issues all the time in her campaign. She didn't run to make an issue of being a trans person. All she was a person with good ideas and the ability to run an effective campaign who got herself elected to Congress, and good for her. And then the Republicans said she couldn't use the bathroom. And all of a sudden, we were talking about trans people. That wasn't Sarah McBride's fault. That was a tactical decision by the Republicans to put that issue in center stage in a way that was really vile, in my opinion. But even putting that aside, if the Republicans want to bring up this issue all the time, it will be brought up, and I think Democrats have to figure out a way to respond that is true to our values, that doesn't scapegoat people at all, that affirms their dignity, but also doesn't make it seem like we're the ones obsessed with the issue, when in fact it's the Republicans who are bringing it up. The only other thing I would say, I couldn't agree more strongly with Jan saying that we have to deliver economically for everybody, and we have to talk about how we've delivered economically for everybody. I think if there were one sort of substantive mistake I would point to, I would say, incumbent parties have had a heck of a time in re-elections around the whole world. Inflation is happening around the whole world. It's bitterly unpopular everywhere. It is certainly true that the American economy is doing better and the American inflation numbers are better than almost anywhere else in the world, but
nobody wants to hear about
But nobody wants to hear it. And trying to tell people that your pain isn't really that bad, look at these statistics, is never going to work. And so when people are feeling pain, the immediate step needs to be to acknowledge it and try to address it, rather than to try to change the subject, change the story, or convince them that it's not real. And I think that was understandably hard for the Biden administration that did so many good things to meet that squarely head on 2 years ago. But in retrospect, I think that would have been necessary to avoid the outcome that happened a month ago.
Congresswoman Schakowsky, you alluded to the fact that many people who are being proposed for cabinet positions don't have the credentials to fulfill their responsibilities. So the question here is, can you explain the nomination process for cabinet members and the likelihood of these candidates getting their positions? And if you think that there would be any Republicans in the Senate who would vote against any of these candidates?
Well, we got rid of one.
Right, he decided not to continue
yeah,
nomination.
He withdrew.
Right.
I think Donald Trump dominates so much that there is a reluctance on the part of Republicans to say no to some of these nominees, and I'm concerned about that. That even when let me tell just one short thing about fear that the Republicans have when it comes to Donald Trump. When they took over the House last session, I thought, why don't some of I know these people, I work with them, why don't they stand up and say, this isn't right, or I don't agree with Donald Trump. Trump runs a very scary operation where people, Republicans and their get calls that say, I know where your children go to school. I know your address. There are Republicans who are fearful of the kind of retribution that they can find and the threats that they can find from, I don't know who exactly these people are that are willing to do the dirty work, but it happens. It's like mafiosa. It's very scary. So I think that by and large, while there may be some opposition, that he's going to get what he wants. We'll see.
There are several questions about issues of anti-Semitism, some concerns about what people saw happening on campuses around the country last year, and at the same time understanding that pro-Palestinian students also faced doxing and other kinds of threats to them as well, and so finding the right balance about what needs to happen on campus. And at the same time, now that Trump is going to be back into power, the anti-Semitism on the right that we certainly saw during the first Trump administration with the largest mass killing in a synagogue in the history of our country happened under Trump's watch, the march in Charlottesville of the neo-Nazis saying Jews will not replace us, and so those were also concerns. So any commentary you can have about what we can do on these issues of anti-Semitism, both on the right and the left, and also preservation of free speech and others who also feel threatened by things that are happening in our country.
This is a very tense moment. There's no question about it. Anti-Semitism is real. I believe strongly that all students should be able to feel safe on campuses and should not be harassed. We are seeing a huge uptick. On the other hand, we are also seeing Israel not taking a position for ending this war that is killing Palestinians, children, suffering. So this is a really fraught moment. I do appreciate that Joe Biden made some agreement that may help us among, what was that?
The ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yeah, with Hezbollah. So that's good. He's hoping that
even though it hasn't held quite, but we can hope.
What?
that
Well,
it will
we're
hold.
hoping, exactly, and Biden is hoping that ceasefire with Hezbollah may actually strengthen the opportunity for ceasefire in Gaza and to make some changes. But I don't see from Bibi Netanyahu a real effort to do anything that would favor the Palestinians, although he thinks that there may be some hope in Gaza, but I think they're looking more at the real estate there and getting rid of, getting rid of Palestinians altogether. This is a tough moment, and Bibi Netanyahu was very happy that Trump won, And in many ways, they're kind of two peas in a pod. Rabbi, what do you think?
I'm going to turn it to Mayor Biss today.
You know, I think maybe even, forgive me if I've got this wrong, I think even maybe the last time I was here was shortly after what I think is fairly characterized as a neo-Nazi outburst
At a city
city
council
council
meeting.
meeting
Mhm.
that,
Yep.
that called you and this congregation out by name, that read my address out loud. Every member of city council, I mean, they picked us in part because I'm Jewish, I'm quite certain, based on this group's history, but all the other city council members who aren't Jewish also got at their home, some of whom have second graders, you know, small children. They got in their home, viciously racist and anti-Semitic postcards. I have to tell you, and I don't think I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I have to tell you that I felt naive. You know, I'm the grandson of survivors, and I grew up in this country. I learned a lot about anti-Semitism. I heard a lot about anti-Semitism. I read a lot about anti-Semitism, but I never felt anti-Semitism. I have to confess to you that in my heart of hearts, it sort of felt like a thing of the past or a thing from over there. And it just hasn't felt that way since 2017, and especially not more recently. And so, yes, anti-Semitism is real, and these incidents are on the rise, and we have to be really, really clear and unambiguous in condemning it. I have to tell you, people get sick of me praising our police chief, but she's just that good, so I have to keep praising her. She really feels this issue. She really cares about this. On the regrettable occasions when there have been threats made against synagogues, she's leaping into action. She's proactive before the high holidays. She's really thinking strategically about how to not only react, but anticipate any actions that might be connected to the anti-Semitism that's out there. And I'm enormously appreciative of that. I think it really is helpful. I mean, I hate having to say this so much, but I feel personally, as a Jewish mayor with kids in my house, safer because of it. But I also, more importantly, feel that the Jewish congregations in our community are safer as well. You know, I do think that the right of protest and the right of freedom of speech is really, really pivotal. I'm well aware that when the encampment occurred at Northwestern last spring, there were a lot of things that were said there that not everyone in this room probably felt good about. There were a lot of things written on signs that not everyone in the room felt good about. But I also have to tell you that, like any large demonstration, our police were monitoring the situation, and they concluded that it was not a public safety threat. And my position as the mayor is that when a demonstration is not a public safety threat, it's not our job to interfere with that expression. And I know that was a controversial decision for some, but I feel very strongly that it was the right thing to do, to allow that to continue, to allow it to be ended by negotiation rather than by force. And I also think that making a different decision would have caused a very counterproductive backlash. And so as I negotiate and navigate these issues, I am very sensitive to what the rise in anti-Semitic incidents means and what obligation it places on us. And I try to be equally sensitive to the importance of every community's safety and security, and the role that free speech and free expression have to play in a free society.
And I just want to publicly thank you, Mayor Biss, for your support. That after that last incident, you and our councilperson, Jonathan Newsma, were here at Friday night services supporting us. The interfaith community wrote a very strong statement, which they delivered to their congregations as well, because I think that one of the most important things we need to be doing to support ourselves and to protect ourselves is to be in relationship with the city council, to be in relationship with the police department, which has been very responsive. We had, an incident here just a few weeks ago, and I don't even call the emergency line. I call and I say, "Hi, it's Rabbi London, and the police are here." I mean, it's really that quick, and people are here to help us out and to talk us through issues. So I really do. I really do appreciate that and feel like there is a lot of support in this community, and I think that's very, very important. And thank you. Thank you for all that you do. So there's several, a few other questions around Israel. So I'm going to turn those to you also, Congresswoman Schakowsky, about your thoughts about Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel and what that will mean, and what you think Mike Huckabee being appointed to be the ambassador to Israel, what you think about that appointment, and what you think the Democratic Party's policies should be vis-a-vis Israel.
And I think the Huckabee appointment is a disgrace. And, we've heard enough already. But what was the second part?
The second one, what do you think the Democratic Party's positions should be vis-a-vis Israel, given the current situation?
It's really difficult right now. I mean, I am working very hard to see that we get a ceasefire ASAP. I've been in very close contact with a lot of the hostage families, and they're furious that more has not been done, and it's interesting. We talk about anti-Semitism, but by and large, what you hear from the Republicans is pretty much across the board, whatever Israel wants, Israel should get. And I think that we have to have a more nuanced position on that so that we can help foster ending this war that we have. I do think that Netanyahu is not leading us and not leading Israel in the right direction, has become a pariah among countries, among many countries, not all, certainly, around the world. And so this is a fraught, historic moment, I think, of what direction is Israel going to be moving in, and how are we going to protect ourselves? Sometimes these seem contradictory. So this is a difficult, on every front, a very, very difficult time. I would like to see a long-term solution that does include autonomy for Palestinians, a two-state solution. I would like to see that. I know it's not a popular phrase these days, but I think otherwise we end up with perpetual conflict.
So I'm going to bring it back home again here. So there, is concern with a second Trump presidency that, he might use National Guard or Army troops to impose his will on communities if they're not cooperating with what he would want them to do. If that were to happen and troops were to come to Evanston, do we have an emergency plan in place?
Well, these are the kinds of threats that we see of not only the military, but all those involved with these national decisions that he wants to have full and complete autonomy over, and appoint all the people who would make those decisions. This is I think it does call for some sort of a fierce response.
Mayor, what would we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think about this question constantly. I think, you know, I'm sensing the exact same thing that I believe Jan referenced earlier, which is that, you know, many of us, I think a lot of people in this room, spent a lot of time in the streets in early 2017 and throughout the Trump administration. So I spent a lot of hours in Federal Plaza, surrounded by people in pink hats. I'm not feeling the eagerness to do that among many people this time. In part, yes, it's because they're tired. In part, perhaps even they feel beaten down. But part of it is they're scared. They're scared of a Department of Justice that they anticipate being weaponized as a full arm of the Trump political organization with a politicized military. People are scared. And so we have on the books a variety of rules in Evanston about non-cooperation with federal immigration authorities under certain circumstances, non-cooperation with prosecutors. If prosecutors from jurisdictions with anti-abortion laws try to come to Evanston to demand our law enforcement cooperation with their enforcement of their laws, we take that really, really, really seriously. But I'm not going to lie to you, Rabbi. The thought of the federal armed forces coming to Evanston to impose their will on us, I guess what I would just say in response to the direct question is that I hope we can all agree that that's not going to be step one. And so part of what I think we must do in preparing for and frankly fighting back against this second Trump administration is to be extremely nimble. He says millions of crazy things, and he only follows through on thousands of them. And so we need to be thinking about everything, but as we watch what happens leading into January 20th and beyond, we're going to learn something about which of the dangerous things that he said are coming true, which ones are going to be on the back burner, what order they're going to come in. And that's going to have to play a critical role in shaping our strategy. But I think the question is right. We've got to be ready for anything.
Let me just say, Senator Durbin has been doing a great job of getting appointees in this short period now, well, for the last couple of years, but approved judges. And that is very important, and he's going as quickly as he can right now to make sure that these judges are certified, are approved. We have to have as many as we can right now.
So I think time for one more question as we conclude. And Mayor Biss, when you said you don't see the energy for people getting out in the streets and people are afraid, I have felt that same thing. That I think that enthusiasm that we're going to go to Washington and we're going to have these large marches and they're going to see this overwhelming groundswell of people who are for equality and justice and fairness for everyone, and that there's a real fear that there could be violence in the streets and that won't be the best strategy. I also think there's some disappointment that the last time people spent 4 years going out and doing this, it didn't necessarily make the kinds of changes that people expected. So what do we do strategically? And I think that's another question people keep asking is, how do we focus strategically on what we do now at this time? We've heard you both talk about how we have to lift up our voices to make sure that when we see things, that we say things, that we protest against it. But are there other strategies that we really could be employing that would be helpful to make sure that we're continuing to support oppressed populations, to make sure that the hatred that is out there is not going to spread, that people will have access to their rights and to the care that they need? What is our strategy? What's our best strategy right now?
Yeah.
Well, let me just say, the midterms are going to be important. I think there is a really good chance that the the House rather, will be in the hands of the Democrats. And that would mean that we'd have some stopgap to, try and stop some of these things. It's going to be very, very important. But I think because I think a lot more people are going to start getting worried right now, very soon, and are going to want those kinds of changes. Unlikely because the Senate, although the senators that are going to be up next time, it's worse for the Republicans right now, who's up for election. But I think our hope is electorally is more in the House of Representatives. But I think people are afraid to be on the streets. We may have to. We really may have to have big protests in the United States of America. And I think there may be more people than we think that are ready to go if it gets as bad as it could. We're going to have to work together.
That's right.
Mayor?
Yeah, a few additional things. First of all, I do want to say, Rabbi, I get the sentiment. I'm not dismissing it at all. But if someone is thinking, I don't want to do it again because it didn't work last time, I just have to push back against that. It did work last time. It did work last time. It worked in the 2018 elections. It worked in the 2020 elections. It worked to stop the the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. It stopped, frankly, Trump had Republican majorities in both houses of Congress for 2 years and got one really, really big bill through, which was a bad bill, but a lot of other things were stopped. And so I beg of you, I know how it feels to sit where we sit now, but please don't think that it was all pointless, because there were many tangible, real-world changes that came out of it. That's number one. Number two, I think one of the things that mass mobilization did was it kind of demonstrated, hey, there is a big audience ready to fight back. And then what happened in 2018, we had candidates step up to run in those midterm elections because they saw there was a giant base of support. So Sean Casten and Lauren Underwood both went to Congress in 2018. By the way, in districts that when we in the state legislature in 2011 drew those maps, we drew them to be unwinnable by a Democrat. And Sean and Lauren both won in 2018. We had candidates of the caliber we had because they saw there was a mass movement that they could be a part of. And I think that message has been sent. I don't think we're going to want for strong, dedicated, progressive, capable, skilled, passionate people running across the country in 2026. A few last things. First of all, I think part of what we have to do in lieu of just mass mobilization is act. So I take really seriously my responsibility as the mayor of a community where Kamala Harris got 90.93% of the vote, not that I'm counting, because my community has said, we don't like the direction that the country is likely to go under Trump, and so that says to me and my colleagues on city council, we've got a really long leash to do a lot to go in a different direction here in Evanston. I'm so pleased the state of Illinois has done the same thing and will continue to do the same thing, and progressive and democratic states and communities across the country need to do that, not only to pass policies to protect people from what the Trump administration may and will do, but also to provide an alternative. To say, here's a different way of doing government, and when you do it well, people like it and communities thrive, and to allow the process of people voting with their feet to be a quiet referendum in support of our value system. And finally, I do want to end by agreeing enthusiastically with Jan. There may come a time when we have no choice. I think back to early 2017. I was among the millions and millions of people marching the day after the inauguration. We just felt like something really terrible was happening, and we had to go march. It was only a week later that I was part of an absolutely enormous group that gathered spontaneously at O'Hare to protest the Muslim ban. So the first gathering was, we are just signing up to protest whenever the protest happens because this guy stinks. And the second gathering was, hold on, there is something concrete happening and we have to put our bodies in the way of it going on. And I think that when that second category occurs, when we are called not just to generically protest because we're so upset, but to say, here is a specific bad thing coming and here's a strategy to stop it, if we all march together, I think we have to be willing to do that, and I think people will be willing to do that.
Thank you. That's exactly the right note that we want to end on, that there are things that we can do, that there's much that was accomplished in a difficult time in the last Trump administration, and that people who really stand up for that which is right and good can make a big difference. And we really appreciate Congresswoman Schakowsky and Mayor Biss, how you do that for our communities, how you give us hope by what you do each and every day, that hope is not just something that we feel in our hearts, but something that we do in our actions, and to make sure that we are creating a community that is looking out for everybody, in a community that really is working for justice and fairness and right, which is so much of course, of what we learn in our Jewish tradition, what our obligations are, that when we talk about tikkun olam, to repair the world, when we talk about tzedek tzedek tirdof, that we have to pursue justice, this is the heart of our faith, and the two of you live that each and every day, and you give us a tremendous amount of hope that we know we can work with you in order to accomplish great things. And it's great to have so many people filling the sanctuary and zooming in from wherever they are, to know that you have all of us that you can count on as well. So thank you.